This is 8.2 for Secondary Math 3 Honors or 3.2 for IB Math. We're talking about arithmetic sequences. With arithmetic sequences, you're basically just saying, for example, if we had 2, 4, 6, that's an arithmetic sequence because each time I'm adding 2. Or we could do 5, 2, -1. Each time I'm subtracting 3. So it has a common difference. The difference on this one being 2 because we're adding 2 each time. The difference on this one being -3 because we're subtracting 3 each time. There's the two different formulas, recursive and explicit. And if you remember back to our last video, the recursive one depends on previous terms. So to get 6, I would need the 4. To get the 4, I would need the 2. Explicit is where I could just plug in which term it is that I'm looking for and the first term, and then I can just get it that way. So I can get like the 10th term without finding all of the ones before. So for our examples, we're going to find the different forms of these sequences and then find the 25th term. So first we have to identify the first term, and in both of these it's just listed as the first one. So my first term is 2 and 13. And then I have to identify the difference. Now the difference is just going to be, well, how is it moving? So on this first one we're adding 9 each time. And then on the second one we're subtracting 5 each time. So then we go into, well, let's write the recursive formula. So recursive is going to be where I need a couple pieces of information. The actual formula itself is going to be take your previous term and add the difference. So take your previous term and the difference. And then you also have to include what your first term is. So that's the recursive formula for that one. For this one, so take your previous term and add our difference. Since it's a negative, I'm just going to say subtract 5. And also list your first term. So that's just the recursive for those. Now the explicit is a little different. Where we take our first term, and our first term on this one's 2, and add n minus 1 times the difference. And then you can go through and simplify that. So I'm going to distribute the 9. And I'm going to run out of paper or space. It's going to run into the next piece. So I'm going to write it over here so it doesn't bleed through. So then the explicit piece is, it's kind of good practice to write the n term first, so 9n minus 7. Okay, so that's the explicit piece for that one. And then, so we have the recursive, the explicit, and then we also are going to need to find that 25th term. So I'm just going to use our explicit piece and say, well, the 25th term is when n is 25. So I just do 9 times 25 minus 7. So my 25th term is 218. And then those are the pieces of information for that. If we go back over to this one, the recursive, and then the explicit is going to be, again, the same concept. We're going to take our first term, which was 13, add n minus 1 times the difference, which in this case is negative 5. And then we're going to distribute that. And then we get, so negative 5n, you can hear the baby in the background, plus 18. So that is our explicit formula. And then to find the 25th term, we just plug in 25. So negative 5 times 25 plus 18, and you get 107, negative 107. So if I put this back up there, that's what you're dealing with. So that's just how you do the recursive and explicit formulas. Okay, and then sometimes it's not going to give you enough of the information. So for this one, find a definition for the arithmetic sequence whose first term is 5 and fifth term is 11. This is saying to basically insert 3 arithmetic means. This is because if we kind of list this out, slide this up a little bit. We have our first term, second term, third term, fourth term, fifth term, and I could keep going with this. But the information that it gives me is that my first term is 5, and my fifth term is 11. So I'm missing 3 middle terms here. So what I'm going to do to kind of figure this out is I'm going to have to find the common difference here. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to write an explicit formula for this. Now I'm not going to have all the pieces of information. I have that my first term is that 5. So, and then n minus 1 times the difference. And I'm actually going to just leave the difference off to the side. Well, I know what the fifth one should be. So when n is 5, when n is 5, I should get that it is 11. So I have that. So then I'm just going to subtract 5 from both sides, and I get 6 is equal to, and then 5 minus 1 is 4. And so then I can find the difference being 6 divided by 4, or 3/2. So now I actually have the difference that I can plug in for here. So I have a subscript n equals 5 plus n minus 1 times that difference. I'm going to distribute that in. So I have 3/2 n minus 3/2. So I'm going to get a common denominator. So I really have 10/2. And then I'm going to just move this over, minus 3/2 plus the 3/2 n. And again, I'm going to write the n term first. So 3/2 n. And then 10/2 minus 3/2 is 7/2. So, no, that doesn't have an n. So that is your formula. If you wanted to write it a different way, you could. You could also write this as 3n plus 7 all divided by 2, since they have that common denominator. That would work as well. Okay, and then let's see where we at. So if I ask you to pull up the next one, say whether something is a given or something given is an arithmetic sequence. If yes, find the common difference and the 50th term. If not, say why not. I don't know why there's a number 2 there. I don't know. Okay, so with our first one, and I'm going to actually have this kind of up here. So these were our formulas, or cursive and explicit. So this is not dependent on a previous term, so this would be an explicit formula. One thing that I want to note is, so yes, this is an arithmetic sequence. To find the difference, we're going to have to kind of do a lot of algebra. So what I'm going to do is say, okay, I have this a subscript n, and then I also am going to pretend like I have the next term. Okay. Sorry, the baby was doing something. I'm actually going to pause here, and we'll just do 2 videos on these notes.